3 months after I finally walked away from my wealthy benefactor, I accidentally charged a box of ultra-thin condoms to his linked card. He sent a single, sharp text. Is he better than me? I ignored it. But that very night, when I returned to my hotel room on a business trip, a tall, imposing silhouette blocked my path. The man who was supposed to be 1,000 miles away, Marcus, stood before me, looking windswept and lethal. In bed, he was merciless, driving me to the brink of madness. As I completely fell apart under him, he nipped at my earlobe, his voice low and dangerous. Does he make you feel like this too? I bit my lip, refusing to give him the satisfaction of an answer. Deep down, a foolish spark of joy flared at his jealousy. Until the storm subsided, the lust fading from his dark eyes. Kelly, I'm getting married, he said, cold and detached. This is the last time. I froze. The words felt like a bucket of ice water poured directly over my head. A deep, numbing chill seeped from my scalp down to my toes. Marcus rolled off the bed. A moment later, the sharp hiss of the shower echoed from the bathroom. I lay motionless on the tangled sheets. The harsh glare of the ceiling light made my eyes burn. I couldn't even remember how we had broken up 3 months ago. I only remembered the massive argument, the suffocating silence, and how I had impulsively thrown the word over in his face. He hadn't tried to soothe me. He hadn't even asked why. He had only looked at me with those cool, unreadable eyes and asked, "Are you sure about this?" I had nodded. Then, without another word, I packed my bags and took a long-term assignment in Chicago. I thought putting distance between us would help clear the lingering fog of heartbreak. I was wrong. For 3 months I buried myself in endless work trying to numb my own mind. Yet the moment the noise quieted down, his image would flood my thoughts, relentless and agonizing. So today, in a moment of pure, desperate madness at a convenience store, I swiped the joint credit card he had never deactivated. I bought a box of ultra-thin condoms. I wanted to see if he still cared. And he had come. He had caught a last-minute flight and driven through the night just to corner me in my hotel room. For a brief, naive moment I believed we were going to make up. But after the passion cleared, he gave me a death sentence. He was getting married. When Marcus stepped out of the bathroom, he wore nothing but a low-slung towel around his waist. The lean, powerful muscles of his back and shoulders glistened under the dim yellow lights. He walked over to the bed, looking down at my motionless, curled-up form, and let out a soft frown. Go wash up. I dragged myself up mechanically, my legs trembling so violently I could barely stand. Before I could fall, he stepped forward, scooped me up effortlessly in his arms, and carried me into the bathroom. It was just like the countless times before. He squeezed the body wash into his palm, rubbing his hands together until a thick lather formed. Then he gently washed every inch of my skin. His touch was unbelievably tender, as if he were handling a piece of priceless, fragile porcelain. But my chest throbbed so hard I could barely breathe. He rinsed the soap away, shut off the water, and wrapped me in a plush towel. He didn't say a single word through it all. I stood there, swallowed by the fabric, watching him walk toward the door. Congratulations. The word escaped my throat, raspy and hollow. Marcus paused. He turned his head slightly. His brow furrowed, as if trying to make sense of what he had just heard. His Adam's apple bobbed. What did you say? Congratulations on your wedding. I forced my lips to curve into a fragile, pathetic smile. Marcus stared at me for several long seconds, his gaze dark and unreadable. Get some sleep, he finally said. I'll book another room next door. I was used to it. He was an incredibly light sleeper and hated sharing a bed through the night. Over the past few years, no matter how exhausted I was after we made love, I would always quietly gather my things and retreat to the guest bedroom. By the time I woke up the next morning, bright sunlight was already streaming through the window. I checked my phone. 9:30 a.m. There were 3 unread texts from my colleagues at the media network. Kelly, where are you? Today's the day the executive director announces your promotion to lead producer. My heart leaped into my throat. I threw the phone onto the bed and rushed to get ready. Marcus had kept me up until 3 in the morning, and the ensuing insomnia had stolen another 2 hours of sleep. My entire body felt as though it had been run over by a semi-truck. I practically threw myself down the stairs and ran out of the lobby, only to stop dead in my tracks. A sleek black Maybach was idling right at the hotel entrance. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing Marcus in the driver's seat. He wore a charcoal gray dress shirt today, the sleeves rolled up carelessly to his forearms, exposing the firm, corded muscles of his wrists. He glanced at me. Get in. I'll drive you. My instinct was to refuse, but he had already reached over and popped the passenger door open. After a second of agonizing hesitation, I climbed in. As I pulled the seatbelt across my chest, I deliberately kept my eyes glued to the side. Just drop me off near the broadcasting station. He didn't answer, simply shifting the car into drive. We rode in absolute silence. The only sound was the faint, steady hum of the air conditioner. I stared out the window, watching the city skyline blur past. As the familiar glass facade of the media building came into view, 2 traffic lights away, I spoke up. You can pull over right ahead. Marcus glanced at the road, his speed unchanging. We're not there yet. I don't need to be dropped off at the front doors, I said, biting my inner cheek. Today is my promotion day. I don't want people spreading rumors. He went quiet for a moment. Then he smoothly brought the car to a halt by the curb. I pushed the door open and forced a polite, professional tone. Thank you, Mr. Mercer. Marcus frowned, his eyes darkening. I prefer it when you call me Marcus. You're getting married. It's not appropriate anymore. He didn't say another word. He simply checked his mirror, hit the gas and left me in a cloud of exhaust. Fortunately, I wasn't late. The moment I walked into the station, several colleagues rushed over to congratulate me. Congrats, Kelly. You have to buy us coffee once the official announcement is made. I smiled warmly. I'll do you one better. Dinner is on me. The bullpen was lively and full of chatter until an assistant tapped my shoulder, telling me the executive director wanted to see me in his office. My chest swelled with excitement as I walked down the corridor. 5 years of relentless grinding in this cutthroat city. I was finally going to secure my place. But that short-lived thrill died the moment I stepped inside the director's office. Kelly, after a board review, we've decided that starting today, Serafina will take full charge of the late-night finance program. We'd like you to assist her with the transition. I stood frozen, my voice trembling. I've built that program from the ground up. Why is it suddenly being handed over to a newcomer who literally just joined the network? When I first took over late-night finance, it was the lowest-rated slot on the network. I had poured my soul into it, turning it into our flagship program. The director gave me a look of mild, patronizing pity. It's a decision from the top, Kelly. Seeing that I wasn't backing down, he decided to lay his cards on the table. Serafina brought a $12 million sponsorship package with her. That single deal covers our advertising targets for the next decade. If you were in my shoes, who would you choose? I leaned against the wall, my head spinning. The door clicked open behind me. A young woman dressed in an immaculate designer blazer stepped in. She was strikingly beautiful. She extended a manicured hand. Hi, I'm Serafina. I recognized her instantly. She was Marcus's childhood sweetheart, the girl who had just returned from Europe, his fiancée. All the scattered pieces in my head snapped into a cruel, perfect picture. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind that $12 million sponsorship. A bitter, quiet laugh escaped my throat. A couple of years ago, to secure a much smaller sponsorship for my show, I had practically begged Marcus for months just to get a $1 million deal. I had been profoundly grateful for it. Yet for Serafina, he had signed away $12 million without batting an eye. $12 million versus $1 million. I guess I truly was only worth a fraction of her in his eyes. Or maybe I didn't even register on his scale at all. I went straight to Marcus's corporate headquarters. The receptionist recognized me and bypassed security, letting me straight into his private office. Marcus was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, reviewing a stack of documents. He didn't even bother to look up. Something on your mind? My throat tightened, and I struggled to hold back the tears stinging my eyes. My voice cracked. There are dozens of slots at the network. Why did you have to let her take mine? Only then did Marcus raise his eyes. His gaze was entirely flat, devoid of any warmth. Because she wanted it. I stared at him, utterly paralyzed. Because she wanted it. With a single sentence, he justified throwing millions of dollars around to clear her path. Because she wanted it, he could effortlessly erase 5 years of my sweat, tears, and sleepless nights. He knew better than anyone what I had sacrificed for that show. During our peak season, I had worked myself to the point of physical collapse, ending up in the ICU with severe exhaustion. Tears spilled over my cheeks. Marcus, that's not fair. Kelly, he interrupted, his tone chillingly level. He set his pen down and leaned back in his leather chair. If I remember correctly, there were 3 candidates when you interviewed for that associate position years ago. The other 2 had Ivy League degrees and prestigious journalism backgrounds. Do you know why a state college graduate with 0 media experience like you got hired? While I stood there in stunned silence, he delivered the final blow. Because I made a $1 million donation to the network, on the sole condition that they hire you. Marcus stared at me as if I were a minor investment that had run its course. Kelly, there is no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. When you reach my level, then you can come talk to me about fairness. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and hollow. So that was the truth. On the day I received my offer letter, I had sat in my cramped, drafty apartment and cried tears of pure joy, believing my hard work had finally paid off. But it had all been a lie. I don't remember how I stumbled out of his office. His words felt like a physical assault, stripping away the last shreds of my dignity. I was utterly humiliated, with nowhere left to hide. When I first met Marcus, I was just a struggling, desperate intern. It was at a high-stakes networking dinner. After a few rounds of drinks, the atmosphere in the private dining room grew thick and predatory. The senior producer sitting next to me let his hand slide under the table, his fingers creeping toward my thigh. My body went rigid with terror. I tried to pull away, But I didn't dare make a scene and ruin the network's deal. Choking back my tears, I threw a desperate, pleading look at my team leader, the man who was supposed to be mentoring me. He blinked, registered what was happening, and promptly looked away. That was when Marcus, who had barely spoken a word all night, abruptly stood up. He walked over, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me out of my seat. Looking down at my tear-streaked face, he said, "Crying in front of these wolves won't save you, little girl." Then he wrapped his large, warm hand over mine, picking up a heavy glass bottle from the table. A flash of pure, dangerous intent crossed his handsome features. With a sudden violent motion, he forced my hand down, smashing the bottle squarely over the producer's head. The crash was deafening. The producer collapsed to the floor, groaning in pain. The room fell into a stunned, breathless silence. Marcus looked down at me, his voice steady and low. "Only this works. Understand?" I stared up at him, completely captivated by the intensity in his dark eyes. The chaotic noise of the room faded into nothing. All I could hear was the frantic, thumping beat of my own heart. So when we met again in the elevator bank weeks later, and he asked me in that cool, detached voice, "Your name is Kelly, right? Are you open to a strictly physical arrangement?" I didn't hesitate. My life had been a bleak, colorless struggle up to that point. I had never encountered anyone so brilliant, powerful, and utterly mesmerizing. In that moment my body answered for me. I nodded. From that day on, every encounter ended with a generous transfer to my account, alongside an endless stream of designer bags and jewelry. I didn't go back to my apartment right away. I walked aimlessly down the crowded streets of the financial district, the icy wind biting through my thin coat. The city buzzed with oblivious energy, people rushing past me toward their glossy, purposeful lives. I was an empty ghost moving among them. When I finally reached the media building again, the sun was beginning to dip below the skyline, casting long bruised shadows across the granite plaza. I walked into the bullpen. It was empty except for a few low-level editors working the night desk. My desk, the one I had sat at for 5 years, where I had eaten lukewarm takeout at 2 a.m. while editing graphics for late night. Finance was already cleared. A sleek, minimalist vase with fresh white orchids sat where my framed first press pass used to be. Serafina's touch. My team leader, the man who had looked away when that producer harassed me 5 years ago, stepped out of his corner office. He looked uncomfortable seeing me. "Kelly," he sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "Look, you shouldn't be here tonight. Take a few days off. Serafina wants to restructure the team and we can discuss your transition package next week." "I'm not transitioning anything," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady, stripped of all the panic and tears from earlier. "I resign." He blinked, taken aback. "Kelly, don't be foolish. The market is tough right now. If you leave without a recommendation—" "I don't need your recommendation," I interrupted calmly. "I gave this network 5 years of my life. You gave my work to a girl who bought it with a $12 million check. We're even." I turned on my heel and walked out before he could answer. Back at my cramped, rented apartment on the north side of the city, I dragged my suitcase from under the bed. I didn't cry. The tears had burned out inside Marcus's office. Instead, a cold, ruthless clarity settled over me. Marcus had bought my career for $1 million. He had treated me like a charity project, a stray dog he fed and kept on a velvet leash until he got bored and handed my bowl to someone else. I sat down at my desk and pulled up my bank accounts. Over the 5 years I was with him, Marcus had deposited millions into the joint account. I had used some of it for my mother's medical bills before she passed, and I had bought designer clothes, jewelry, and watches to fit into his world. I pulled out every single luxury item he had ever given me. The Patek Philippe watch, the card.He bracelets, the limited edition Birkin bags sitting in dust covers at the top of my closet. I took them all to a high-end consignment dealer downtown the next morning. "These are pristine, Miss Elrod," the dealer said, appraising the jewels under a magnifying glass. "I can wire you the funds by tomorrow afternoon, but you're taking a 20% loss on liquidation." "I don't care," I said. "Just sell them." 2 days later the funds cleared. I emptied my personal savings account, every penny I had earned from my actual salary at the network, and combined it with a consignment payout. I logged into the online banking portal for the joint account Marcus had given me. I calculated the exact sum of every single transfer he had made to me over 5 years, plus the $1 million donation he had paid the network to get me hired. With my savings and the sold jewelry I had enough. I hit transfer. I transferred $1,840,000 directly back into Marcus Mercer's primary corporate account. Then I took the black credit card, the one I had used 3 days ago at the convenience store to buy that stupid box of condoms, and cut it cleanly in half with a pair of heavy-duty scissors. I put the cut pieces into a plain white envelope, addressed it to Mercer Enterprises, and dropped it in the mail. I didn't owe him a single cent. I didn't owe him my career, my life, or my soul. I was broke. I had less than $200 left in my checking account, a stack of unpaid bills and no job. But for the first time in 5 years I was clean. 2 weeks later, the media industry in Chicago was hit by an unexpected storm. Serafina's debut as the lead producer and host of Late Night Finance was a total disaster. Despite the $12 million set, the state-of-the-art graphics, and a massive PR campaign pushed by Mercer Enterprises, Serafina lacked basic broadcast instincts. During her live premiere, she stumbled over elementary market terms, misread the teleprompter during a breaking Fed interest rate announcement, and condescended to an invited guest who happened to be a senior economist. The ratings plunged by 40% in the first week. Twitter tore her apart. Industry blogs called the show a $1 million vanity project with zero substance. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a cramped, drafty basement office on the south side of Chicago eating a $3 microwave burrito. I had taken a job at the Horizon, a struggling independent digital news outlet. My salary was less than a third of what I used to make. There were no drivers, no mahogany desks, and no expense accounts. The entire staff consisted of 4 people. A cynical veteran investigative journalist named Vance, 2 fresh-faced college interns, and me. "You're crazy, Kelly," Vance said, tossing a cold cup of coffee into the trash. "You used to run the hottest show in the city. Now you're writing column pieces for an outlet that can barely pay rent." "I'm not crazy," I said, my eyes glued to my laptop as I edited an investigation into local municipal bond corruption. Here, nobody can tell me my work belongs to someone else. That night, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was an unknown number. I picked it up, expecting a lead for a story. "Kelly." The deep, magnetic voice sent an involuntary shiver through my spine. "Marcus." I held the phone to my ear, my pulse remaining flat and cold. I didn't say word. Silence stretched across the line, heavy and suffocating. I could hear his steady, rhythmic breathing. "What is the meaning of the transfer?" he asked finally. His tone was clipped, stripped of its usual lazy arrogance. "And the card in the mail?" "It means I paid you back, Mr. Mercer," I said smoothly. "With interest. I didn't ask for your money. And I don't take charity," I replied. "The $1 million you paid to get me hired 5 years ago, plus every allowance you ever gave me. It's all back in your account. You don't own me anymore." A long pause followed. I could picture him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, a glass of scotch in his hand, his jaw tight. "You think returning the money erases what happened between us?" he sneered quietly. "You think you can just wash your hands of me, Kelly?" "Yes," I said. "And please don't call this number again. It's my work phone and I have actual work to do." "Kelly." I hung up before he could finish the sentence. I blocked the number immediately. Then I turned back to my laptop and kept typing. In the penthouse suite of the Mercer Tower, Marcus stood in the dark, holding his phone as the line went dead. His dark eyes were stormy, reflecting the glittering lights of the Chicago skyline below. On the glass coffee table behind him lay the opened envelope containing the 2 halves of his black credit card, along with the bank confirmation receipt of the $1.84 million wire transfer. When his secretary had first handed him the receipt 2 days ago, Marcus had assumed it was a system error. Kelly had no money. He knew her background better than anyone. Her family was blue collar. Her mother's cancer treatments had wiped out what little savings they had. She had lived on his dime for 5 years. Where could she possibly have gotten nearly $2 million? Then he sent his assistant to check her apartment. The high-end consignment shops in the Loop reported that a young woman matching Kelly's description had brought in a massive collection of designer goods, every piece of jewelry, every watch, every bag Marcus had ever bought her, and sold them at rock-bottom prices. She had liquidated everything. She had stripped herself of every trace of him. "Sir." The door to the study opened softly. Serafina stepped in wearing a silk robe. She looked stressed, her face pale despite her makeup. "Marcus, the network board is calling another emergency meeting tomorrow," she said, her voice laced with frustration and panic. "The sponsors from the tech sector are threatening to pull out. They say the ratings are unacceptable. Can't you talk to the network president? Tell him to fire those internet trolls writing bad reviews." Marcus turned slowly to face her. He looked at the girl he had grown up with, the girl his family had groomed to be his ideal corporate bride. Serafina was polished, wealthy, and impeccably connected. Yet looking at her now, a sudden overwhelming wave of distaste washed over him. When Kelly ran Late Night Finance, she stayed up until 4 a.m. double-checking data. When a sponsor tried to pull out, she spent 3 days straight pitching alternative angles until she saved the account. She had passion. She had grit. Serafina had only his $12 million and an insatiable appetite for prestige. "I gave you $12 million, Serafina," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. I cleared the path for you. If you can't hold a broadcast slot with those resources, no phone call from me is going to save you. Serafina's eyes widened in shock. Marcus, how can you say that? I'm your fiancé. Go to bed, Marcus said coldly, turning back to the window. I have work to do. Serafina stamped her foot in anger and slammed the door shut. Marcus looked down at his phone. He opened his messaging app, staring at the blocked text thread. 3 months ago, when she had walked away after their fight, he had let her go. Because he thought she was throwing a temper tantrum. He thought a few months of real-world struggle in Chicago would break her pride, and she would come crawling back to his bed. Even when she used his card to buy those condoms, he had flown to her hotel room, assuming it was a desperate ploy for his attention. He had taken her body with ruthless dominance, trying to reassert his total ownership over her. He had told her he was getting married to put her in her place, to remind her that she was just a mistress, a disposable pleasure. He had expected tears. He had expected her to beg. He had never expected her to look him in the eye, say congratulations, and completely erase him from her life. A strange, suffocating tightness gripped his chest, a feeling he had never experienced in his 34 years of life. Felt terrifyingly like regret. 6 months passed. Winter arrived in Chicago with a vengeance, wrapping the city in sheets of gray, ice and howling winds. At the horizon, our small team had pulled off the unthinkable. Our investigative series on municipal bond fraud and corporate tax evasion, which I had spent 4 months researching, conducting undercover interviews, and cross-referencing financial ledgers, went viral. Major national outlets picked up the story. The state attorney general's office opened a formal investigation based on the evidence we published. Overnight, the Horizon became the most talked about independent media outlet in the region. My name was on the front page of every journalism review in the country. Kelly Elrod, the rogue producer who uncovered a multi-billion-dollar scam. The headlines read. Offers began flooding into my email. Major networks from New York and Los Angeles were offering me executive producer roles, blank checks, and primetime slots. I declined them all. Instead, I used our newfound credibility to secure legitimate, independent funding for the Horizon. We hired 6 new reporters, moved out of the drafty basement, and built a modest professional studio. I was working 16 hours a day, living on coffee and cold sandwiches, but when I looked in the mirror, my eyes were bright and alive. I didn't belong to Marcus Mercer. I belonged to myself. Meanwhile, Serafina's show on the network was officially canceled. The $12 million sponsorship had been completely drained, the ratings had hit an all-time low, and the network board finally pulled the plug. Serafina became an industry laughingstock, retreating to Europe in embarrassment. One Tuesday evening, the Chicago Press Association held its annual Journalism Excellence Gala at the Drake Hotel. As the lead investigative reporter of the year, I was invited to give the keynote speech. I wore a simple, elegant dark green velvet dress that I had bought with my own hard-earned money. No diamonds, no Cartier bracelets, no designer labels. Just me. When I stepped onto the stage, the grand ballroom, filled with the city's most powerful media executives, politicians, and business titans, erupted into applause. I stood behind the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. And that was when I saw him. Marcus sat at the head table in the front row. He was dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, looking impeccably handsome, but he looked distinctly thinner. His jawline was sharper, his features shadowed, and his dark eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that seemed to burn through the air between us. Beside him sat his father and several high-ranking board members of Mercer Enterprises. Serafina was nowhere to be seen. My heart gave a brief, involuntary thud, but I quickly caught my breath. I looked straight past him, adjusted the microphone, and began my speech. 5 years ago, I said, my voice echoing clearly through the grand hall, someone told me that there is no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. He told me that until I reached the top, I had no right to speak about fairness. The crowd went silent. In the front row, Marcus's body went rigid. His fingers tightened around his wine glass so hard the stem nearly snapped. I used to believe him, I continued, a faint, cold smile touching my lips. I used to believe that success was something granted to us by powerful men sitting in corner offices. But I was wrong. Success isn't a gift. It isn't something that can be bought with a $12 million check. True credibility is earned in the dark, through sweat, truth, and unyielding integrity. The room burst into thunderous applause. I saw several network executives nodding in agreement. I looked down at Marcus. His eyes were bloodshot, staring up at me as if I were a stranger he was desperately trying to recognize. After the gala concluded, I stepped out into the crisp, snowy night waiting for my ride. A sleek black Maybach pulled up to the curb. The back door opened and Marcus stepped out into the falling snow. He wasn't wearing an overcoat. The icy wind whipped his dark hair across his forehead, but he seemed entirely oblivious to the cold. Kelly. I stopped, holding my coat tightly around my shoulders. Mr. Mercer, I said politely, my voice as smooth as glass. Congratulations on Mercer Enterprises' recent acquisition. I read about it in the news. Her cold, formal tone hit him like a physical blow. Marcus took 3 long strides toward me, stopping just inches away. I could smell the familiar, intoxicating scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the faint, bitter aroma of bourbon. Stop calling me that, he rasped, his voice raw and strained. Kelly, please. I looked at him calmly. Is there something you need, Mr. Mercer? If it's regarding media coverage for your firm, you can contact the Horizons PR department. Kelly, I broke off the engagement, he blurted out. I froze for a fraction of a second, then quickly regained my composure. That's between you and Ms. Vane. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you. Marcus roared, his composure completely shattering under the snow-filled sky. The powerful, arrogant billionaire who had always controlled everything looked entirely undone. I canceled the wedding 6 months ago, he said, his chest heaving as he stared down at me with desperate, bloodshot eyes. The day after I saw you in my office. The day you sent that money back. I realized I couldn't touch her. I couldn't look at her. All I could think about was you. He reached out, his long, trembling fingers trying to touch my cheek, but I took a step back, stepping smoothly out of his reach. His hand hovered in the freezing air, looking pathetic and empty. Marcus, I said softly, using his name for the first time in months. It doesn't matter anymore. It does matter, he pleaded, his voice cracking, a sound I had never in 5 years heard him make. I was wrong, Kelly. I was an arrogant bastard. I thought I was protecting you by buying that job for you 5 years ago. I thought I was giving you the world. I didn't realize I was destroying your pride. You didn't destroy it, I said, looking straight into his dark, tortured eyes. You just forced me to rebuild it myself. And for that I suppose I should thank you. Come back to me, he whispered, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I don't care about the business merger. I don't care about my family's expectations. I will give you everything. My company, my name, my life. Just come back. I looked at the man who had once been my entire universe. 5 years ago, I would have dropped to my knees and wept with joy to hear those words. I would have sacrificed everything just to be loved by him. But now, looking at him standing in the snow, begging for my affection, I felt no anger. I felt no lingering heartbreak. I felt only a profound, quiet pity. You don't love me, Marcus, I said gently. You just hate that you lost control over me. You hate that I don't need your money or your power to shine. That's not true, he choked out. I love you, Kelly. I've loved you since the night I smashed that bottle over that man's head for you. No, I shook my head softly. If you loved me, you would have respected me. You would have believed in my talent instead of treating me like a charity case. A sleek rideshare car pulled up behind his Maybach. I looked at Marcus one last time. Good night, Mr. Mercer. I hope you find what you're looking for. I walked past him, opened the door of the modest sedan and climbed inside. Kelly, wait, Marcus shouted, taking a step forward, but the driver pulled away, merging smoothly into the midnight traffic. Through the rear window, I watched his tall, imposing figure grow smaller and smaller under the streetlights, standing alone in the swirling, relentless snow, until he disappeared completely into the night. 1 year later, the spring sun warmed the bustling streets of New York City. The Horizon had expanded its national bureau, and I had permanently relocated to Manhattan to head our investigative division. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment overlooking Central Park. It wasn't a penthouse and it didn't have mahogany paneling, but the rent was paid entirely by my own salary, and every piece of furniture inside was chosen by me. My phone chimed on the table. It was a push notification from the Wall Street Journal. Mercer Enterprises announces major restructuring. CEO Marcus Mercer steps down to lead Global Philanthropic Media Foundation. I scrolled through the article. The piece reported that Marcus had officially resigned from his family's corporate empire, transferring his majority shares to an independent trust. He had dedicated his new foundation to providing unencumbered, nonprofit grants for independent investigative journalism around the globe. Toward the bottom of the article, there was a quote from his farewell press conference. For a long time I believed money could buy power, truth, and human devotion. I was wrong. True journalism and true love cannot be bought, can only be earned. I stared at the screen for a long moment. A quiet, peaceful smile touched my lips. I locked my phone, set it down on the table, and walked inside to prepare for my afternoon editorial meeting. The sky outside was bright, clear, and endless. and for the first time in my life I was flying entirely on my own.